I'm David Thiessen. I work, what do we call that place now? It's not the TLC. It's the project delivery. Anybody quiz? You can still call it the TLC? Okay. Anyway, I am the statewide relocation reviewer and the condemnation officer. I work with DOJ on our condemnation cases. And John is the Region 2 right-of-way manager. So we're going to kind of share this presentation together a little bit. I always like this picture with the road going through the high-rise there. It just, we don't just always buy land. We also buy air rights sometimes to make whatever the situation is work. So I know that's kind of small. I think you have a copy of it in your handout. It's probably small in there too, but yeah, well, sorry. Bring your bifocals or a microscope. Basically, this is the org chart for the TLC, and my managers over here. So we have Scott Claus right below David Kim and Steve Cooley. He is the statewide right-of-way manager. And then we're basically split into two sections. We have operations and we have programs. And on the operations side, we have condemnation and relocation review. We also have appraisal review. And then we also have our title section and our programming section. In the middle section here, we have our admins. And then on the program side, we don't just do right-of-way acquisition, we also do outdoor advertising monitoring. So those billboards that you see along the freeway, all those are regulated and permitted, and we have two gals that do that. We also have a property management section that manages our surplus property. So when we have extra property after a project, we try to get rid of that, and they are in charge of selling that. And then we also have our railroad liaison and our statewide utility liaison in programs. And we have a new section, Section 9, that was provided money from the state legislature to figure out exactly how much excess property we have in the state and document all that. So I think they're looking to get some more money out of that somehow. So we're figuring that out. So in right-of-way, we use eminent domain, which is a process that's been around for a long time. It's basically the right of the sovereign to take property. Of course, we don't just take property anymore and not pay for it. We actually do pay for it, and it's based in the U.S. Constitution in the Fifth Amendment. It basically says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And today we just argue about what just compensation is. Right now, it's basically the appraised property value, but it could change in the future. We're also bound by the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act of 1970 as amended. And that's a federal act that kind of guides our work in right-of-way. So basically, we have our right-of-way manual, which comes out of those previous documents I talked about, and it guides the way we do our work. We also use technical bulletins sometimes when a new situation arises or additional clarification is necessary. And we have a right-of-way leadership group, which they're disbanding the leadership group somewhat, and we're kind of reorganizing that a little bit. But basically, all of the region right-of-way managers and the managers at the TLC get together and discuss key issues and work through problems and come up with solutions. And we also have our RITS system. It's the Right-of-Way Information Tracking System. It's a computer tracking system that organizes all of our work, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the QA/QC portion. There it is. So basically, it has workflows. So somebody will start the workflow, and it'll move through the various processes and come out approved in the end by the approving authority. That gives us a lot of control over the quality of our work products. And since all of our stuff is subject to possible condemnation, we want to make sure that we get it right the first time, because if it gets to DOJ and it's not right, they're not happy, and it really can jeopardize our project. So we don't want that to happen. Also, every region should have a QC plan that they're following. Some of the right-of-way receivables and deliverables. So things that we need a basic design at scoping. So the better design that right-of-way can get, the more accurate our estimate will be, obviously. As we get farther along and we're getting to where we're writing the legal descriptions, we're going to need the official project access list. That's a list that's put together defining all the accesses and any legal access rights that are on the project. We also need the right-of-way legal descriptions, and preferably at DAP. That lets us get started, and we can move forward with our estimate and starting to buy the right-of-way. And coordination with the project team to resolve right-of-way issues as they become known. So you may have a project that you think, well, it's just a paving project, or, we really probably don't need a right-of-way person on this. It might be nice to keep somebody in the loop. They may not have to attend every meeting, but if you keep them on the list so that if something comes up, you have a resource available. Some of the things that we deliver a scoping estimate. At scoping, we also deliver rights of entry. Rights of entry are something that before DAP, if, say, an environmental person or hazmat or another discipline needs to get onto a property to do some testing, we go out there and get you the rights and permissions to be on that property. We don't want people out trespassing. You stay on the right-of-way unless you have a right of entry to be on somebody else's land. We also will provide a programming estimate at DAP. That's where we've taken a look at the footprint, and we have our legal descriptions, and we can tell exactly how much money we're going to need to buy the property. And the last thing we provide is a right-of-way certification, and that's at PS&E. So that's our document that says, hey, we've bought all the right-of-way, we're good to go, happy sailing project. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to John. John's going to talk a little bit about region roles and other things, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon. I'm John Bowles. I'm the Region 2 Right-of-Way and Utilities Manager, and I wasn't here earlier in the day, but is there an organization that has more acronyms than ODOT? I mean, are you guys kind of rummy on DAP, OPAL, et cetera, PS&E? Got it all down? Okay. Well, what you may also have learned is in the project delivery end of the highway division, the regions have a certain role, as well as what we call headquarters and the tech center role. Back in the day, here around 2004, we decentralized, and the regions were given more responsibility to deliver projects. But what you're going to probably learn with not only our discipline but going forward is that there are certain roles that the region plays and roles that the headquarters play. Right-of-way in particular is kind of a hybrid. It's not completely decentralized. There's quite a few roles that are done at the statewide basis. And so what begins out in the region is ultimately has to funnel through and be approved at the right-of-way headquarters. So with that as background, what does the region do for projects? Well, we do the initial scoping, which is done in advance of a particular STIP cycle. Yep, there's another acronym. Does everybody know what that is? Perfect. We then help create programming estimates. And again, referring back to the STIP, there's certain phases within the STIP. There's preliminary engineering, construction phase, and you might also note that there's a separate right-of-way phase in the STIP. So that then requires us to have a separate authorization. Nice. Is that the mascot for, okay. Comfort dog, I guess. Okay. Create the programming estimate, get the authorization from active transportation, and then we're given the green light to go ahead and go out and acquire right-of-way. One of the things that we can't do and still get federal reimbursement is start to acquire right-of-way without the green light. So something important to remember. But our process for acquiring private property is that we have to, as David mentioned earlier, come up with what's called just compensation. And just compensation is done where we go out and appraise a particular property to find out what the market value is for the portion of the property that we're acquiring. And so we, at Region, go ahead and either conduct the appraisal ourselves or contract out with a fee appraiser. Same thing that you would do if you're refinancing your house. Then we go ahead and our agents, right-of-way agents, make offers and negotiate with property owners. And if in our work, if you kind of picture a particular project like the Newburgh-Dundee bypass, where we created a brand new corridor that went through a portion of the city of Newburgh, we went right through the middle of a whole bunch of houses. So what we end up doing is buying all those houses, and as part of our requirements under the law is that we also have to relocate on the public nickel the people to new housing. So that's part of our mandate and part of our funding requirement. And so it's quite a task to work with people who've been displaced from their home. It's emotional, it's not easy, but that's part of what we do. We go out and help them find a new home and then hire a mover and take care of them. So relocating displacees. And then we work our way all the way up to the construction phase or the PS&E. And so we try to identify any particular issues with the construction office that might cause particular problems. What we're hoping to do when we are done with our phase is to deliver what we call possession or ownership of all the new right-of-way, as well as clearing it, so that, again, if you think of the Newburgh-Dundee example, if we've got houses out there, one of the last tasks that we do after relocating them is demolishing all the houses, clearing it out so that a new facility, a new road facility or bridge facility can be built. So that, in a real quick nutshell, is the region's participation in this. And then many of the deliverables that we have are then funneled through with our workflows to the tech service, either active transportation or our headquarters. And that's where we get our funding. That's also, ODOT has its own title closing department. So we do that direct and pay people direct. We also review all of the technical review of all the appraisals, relocation documents, offer documents, and the tech services then, if necessary, if we're unable to acquire the property voluntarily, we exercise our right of eminent domain and condemn the property, and at that point in time, we are able then to take possession of the property, move the people, and what we then legally work with is through our Department of Justice and the homeowner's attorney is how much money we owe them, really, is what it boils down to. So it's the right, a constitutional right that an property owner has, and so it's something that we're very sensitive to. Then you have the final review and payments, as well as working with our federal partner. So how do we acquire? Well, first we describe the property, and this provides, I think it's probably easier to read there, but provides at least a high-level timeline of what it takes from the time that we describe the property, appraise it, work our way through. It's a pretty time-consuming process. A lot of it's legally mandated. It's not like something that we can expedite. There are legal timelines that we have to adhere to, especially with relocation. We can't give an offer to somebody one day and tell them that they have to be out of the property the next. So what we would call an uncomplicated acquisition can take upwards to 9 months minimum, following all the processes, and that's hopefully getting through the voluntary process without a condemnation. A more complicated property that does have relocation can take usually anywhere from 9 months to 13 months. And so when you see and begin to learn our process and somebody says, well, gee, you got right away, that ruins everything because it takes 13 months. Well, this is why. It's not something that we can just snap our fingers and make it go faster. We can't work overtime and make it go faster. There's just mandated timelines that we have to adhere to. So, helping each other out. The best thing for us is that once we get to the design acceptance, we really have genuine footprint so that we can take that footprint and go. If there's continual design revisions and changes, it affects us. We'll have to go back, and unfortunately we can't pick it up in the middle. If we go back, we have to start all over. So if you looked at those 9-month timelines, if something changes 3 months down the road, we have to start over. And so that just adds back to the 9 months. So minimum revisions, access, getting on and off the highway is big. There's certain legal rights to getting on and off the highway. So we need to work through any of those issues. We like to have a right-of-way agent assigned as early as possible so that they can help the team out. And then eventually we'll get to the second and third part of this regarding utilities. And Brian will help explain that. But as you might imagine, there's lots of overhead underground utilities that are in the existing right-of-way that when we widen, as an example, a highway, they need to move. They need to move with us. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. What the rest of the team can do, or what we can do is that we can offer a certain short way of just doing very simple driveway reconductions. You know, many times when we repave, we create a elevation difference between the new pavement and somebody's driveway. Legally, we can't leave a big curb between the highway and the driveway, so we need to feather that in, which requires us going on to somebody's property. So we can acquire the rights to do that. We have a specific dedicated methodology of acquiring right-of-way that we've worked out for ADA ramps only. When we have a condemnation that we don't acquire on time, we call it a holdout, but we can work to limit that so that the project can keep moving forward. We try to work on the files with relocation and the complicated ones, get those started early, and we can provide input into the rest of the design process. So for the contact, this is the headquarters contact as well as each of the regions. You notice David's name is not there, so I'm not quite sure how that happened. But in any event, you've got each of the region manager contacts. And I don't know, we want to hold questions to the very end. I'd be more than willing to flag anything if anybody's awake. Cares. Yes, sir. The question is, how often do we go to condemnation? I think our condemnation rate is probably around between 5 and 10% of the files. Of those, the ones that actually go to trial is like less than 1%. Even when we do that, we usually still settle them. Yes, sir.
Is there a difference for right-of-way in terms of locally funded versus federally funded projects?
Wow, you learn well. Not really. The law is the law is the law. And in our world, we have kind of a key term, whether it's, at least with STIP projects, whether it's state funded, locally funded, or federally funded, we treat it as if it's federally funded, so that when you come back with the next federal dollar on that particular stretch of highway, you can show that whatever right-of-way was there was actually acquired in compliance. And so we treat it as if it's federalized. Some believe that there's some shortcuts if they just use their own money. It's kind of a misnomer, because Oregon state law, let alone the federal funding, mandates that you follow the federal law. So, yes, ma'am.
How does the process get adjusted when you're acquiring contaminated land?
I'm sorry, when you're acquiring.
Contaminated land.
Good question. The question is, how does the process change when you're acquiring contaminated property? Well, we have a couple of different methodologies. We hopefully identify the contaminated properties early. It's not a perfect science. What we try to do is be good stewards of the public dollars, so that we're not paying full market value for something that is otherwise contaminated. One of the jokers in the deck with that is that there's kind of two different definitions of what's contaminated. There's one for a private property owner, and then there's another definition for a public entity. And so by condemnation law, we're required to pay the market value of what a private property owner would expect, regardless of what we have to comply with. And so it's a art as well as a science in doing that. But the bottom line is that not only are we trying to pay a fair dollar figure for it, but we're also trying to set it up so that we can recapture any remediation costs from the responsible party. So, yes, sir.
As a follow-up on that recapturing costs, a lot of times, say you purchase property, you assume it's clean. We're talking contaminated properties.
Mm-hmm.
If you find out after that purchase and you paid full market value, whatever's appraised at, and you find out there is contamination there, say it's not a lot, $100,000 for cleanup. How does that get worked out? Where does that funding, where is it supposed to come from? Is it in the project EA and it's just sort of an unexpected, or how's that supposed to be sorted?
You don't need to talk to a project leader about, no, just kidding. It's a very good question. If you didn't hear him, it's where does the funding come for ODOT's costs for remediation if we don't recapture it from the responsible party? I think it depends, and that's sort of a cop-out answer, but we try to set it up so that our Department of Justice can work its way through the process for the recapture of some of those costs. We also try to not pay full market value. But again, if there are subsequent discoveries of contamination, a lot of times we're on the hook, but I think we're making a stronger effort to go back after and I think we're getting a little bit more support from DEQ and EPA on that as far as identifying who the responsible party is. There are other alternatives. When we identify it early on, and I'm not trying to talk real specifics here, but if you're familiar with real estate title issues and law, when you buy your house, you buy it in what's called fee simple acquisition. There are other modes of purchase, easements, that type of thing, where you buy something less than the full ownership of the property. So you buy something less than the full responsibility for something that might be underground. So those are some other tricks of the trade, I guess, where we can identify that. We can buy the above ground area that we need for the widening of the highway or whatever it is that we're doing, and then the property owner's still on the hook. Thanks.